there. This is section 3.4, two-way frequency table notes. So you are going to watch this video and fill in the notes. There's no warm-up for today just because they're video notes. So we're going to go right into this next section. So going down, looking at these notes, we have what are called two-way frequency tables. So what they're going to do is give you information about two or more things. So the tables displayed here, it's going to make sure that we have at least two categories. So the key words we need to look at, right here we have joint frequency. These are the numbers that are in the middle. And the joint frequencies, joining, what that means is these are actually the numbers that talk about two things at once. So I want you to write that there. These numbers in the middle will always talk about two things. So if I go back and I look here, this number 21, this joint frequency, actually talks about males that like SUVs. That's why it's called a joint frequency. It talks about two. So if I look at, let's look at another number. I have the joint frequency of 45. Again, the middle numbers are the joint frequencies. That would mean my females that prefer sports cars. So whenever we're talking about the joint frequency or the middle numbers, these are the things that refer to two categories. The next part we have are called marginal frequencies. And these are important. These are actually the sums, which another word of that is totals, of the rows and the columns. This talks about one thing. So I'm just going to write one thing. So you look at a column. So for example, these are all marginal frequencies. These are the totals of one thing. So the 60 are how many total males were surveyed. The 180 here is how many total females. So I'm going to erase some of this. Looking again, another marginal frequency going down. Remember rows and columns. If I go down, this is a marginal frequency because it's a total. And this is talking about how many total like SUVs. This total or marginal frequency is how many like sports cars. And then our main total, the marginal frequency, this is the total of how many people surveyed in all. So that's some of the key vocabulary we need to get in order to answer some questions and make the table ourselves. So we're going to look at if we're conducting a survey, and this is going to give us some information in a story problem. So here's example 1. You conduct a survey that asked 286 students in the freshman class whether they play a sport or a musical instrument. So the reason is this is going to talk about sports or musical instruments, and then obviously they're talking, that's the two categories. That's what makes it a joint frequency table. We know our total, it tells us in the story problem, it goes right here, 286 are automatically surveyed. We can put that number in. So now we're going to read the rest to see where we can put some numbers. 118 of the students play a sport. So 118 play a sport. It says, and 64 of those students play an instrument. So if 118 plays a sport, this is just one thing we're talking about. So we want to go to the total, the marginal. So sports, that said yes. What we do is it said 118. So that's how many said yes for our totals. It says 64 of those play an instrument. So that would mean yes to a sport and yes to an instrument. So this is where we come in and we have to look at the yes and the yes. 64 said yes to both. So yes here for an instrument and yes here for our sport. So it's cutting out a little there. All right, next it says 93 of the students do not play a sport or an instrument. So 93 are a no to sports and a no to an instrument. So I'm going to look across. Here's my no here and here's my no. I have to see where they meet. No instrument, no sport. So my 93 goes right there. So we're just filling out the table based on the story problem. We're picking out information. 93. And then it says we're going to organize these results in a two-way table and include the marginal frequencies. So when we have some numbers, we can figure out the other numbers. So remember, I'm going to put our marginal frequencies or our totals. I'm just going to put them over here in blue and maybe label so I can remember with my vocab. The inside, these are my joint frequencies, the inside. These are the ones that talk about two things at once. So how do we fill in the missing blanks? So we can look at, there's a couple different ways, but for the most part, we have to look at where two are filled in at once, and then we can do a missing. So whenever you have a total or a marginal frequency, so here I have a total, and I know that there's 286, and then part of it is 118. So what I'm going to do to find that missing number is I'm going to take 286, and I'm going to subtract that 118, and that's going to tell me my missing total right there. Which means my total is 168. That's how many would go in here. Now, here's another way. Again, we can use subtraction. I have one of my totals, and I need to find, say, this missing one. So I'm going to take my total, my 118, minus this 64 here. We always want to take the bigger number minus the smaller number. With data and two-way tables, there's never going to be negative people. So that's an easy way to remember. And then what's nice is if you have two joint frequencies, you can just add them together. So the 54 plus the 93 will give us the 147 down here. And then again, we can look at, if we wanted to, across here, the 168 minus 93 is going to give us this middle number. So 168 minus 93 would give us 75. And then again, to find a total, if you're given the joints, you just add them together, the 64 plus the 75, so that would be 139. So this is filling out a frequency table if you're only given certain pieces of the information. And then we're going to answer some questions about it. So we want to look at how many students play an instrument. Since this is only asking for one piece of information, I'm going to put that. One piece equals, it's asking for a marginal frequency. So I'm just going to follow either the column or the row across that says plays an instrument. So if you looking down, I'm going to highlight it. How many play an instrument? This is what I'm looking for, the total, one thing. So it would be 139 people. Next, this says how many students play a sport, but not an instrument. This is asking for two things. So that is where we know we're going to be looking at the joint frequency or the inside numbers. So plays a sport, I'll use a different highlighter and I'll have them meet across at each other. So let's see, plays a sport. So I'm going to highlight the yes plays a sport, and it says not an instrument. So the no, where do they meet at? I can see right here. This is yes for a sport and no for an instrument. So my answer would be 54. I like with this section to use highlighters sometimes. Or I can give you a transparency paper. You can put it over top of the worksheet so that you can erase it when you're done. That helps pick out that information. So I want you to use this video, and you're going to do the exact same thing. You are going to do this next example, the checkpoint. It tells you 100 students were surveyed. So remember, sometimes numbers are written. And then it also, this one's even easier. I'm going to put the 100 in for you because there's less of the story problem, but you still have to go through and figure out the rest of the numbers and then answer the questions. So I want you to go ahead and give this one a try on your own and then unpause the video and see if your numbers match up with mine. All right, so hopefully you went through and figured out these numbers by either adding or subtracting from the totals. And we always double check. A little hint is make sure when you're finding these two, they need to add up to the 100. And then again, your totals on the bottom should add up to 100. That way you know you got all the middle numbers right too. So then just make sure yours answers. So then we're going to go to the back and we're going to talk about a little bit of a different twist on this. All right, so the next part of this is when we talk about the joint relative frequency. What that means is we're going to be finding the percent of something. Same with marginal relative frequencies. We're going to find the percent of it. So that basically is what it means. Joint is when we take each category and we divide it by a total. And then again, the sum of the joint relative frequencies in a row or a column, we divide it by a total, we're going to get a percent. So again, let's just practice filling in this table. It gave us all the joint frequencies. So to find the percents for this, first we need to figure out what our totals are. So this here would give us a 20 because these two together, my total would be 20. That's my marginal frequency. We'll talk about getting it relative, which is a percent. Here, 12 and 20 would be 32, and then 18 and 10 is going to be 28, and we're going to look over, and we're going to go across again, and then we have 6 plus 12 plus 18, that's going to get us 36. Again, then we're going to add 14 plus 20 plus 10, so that's going to get us 44, and then in total, we would have that there were 80 people surveyed. That's how I find my total. And again, I could take the bottom numbers, 20 plus 32 plus 8. That should also get me that 80 number here. So that's how we're going to figure out the totals there. So now, for example 2, the relative frequencies, it's going to ask you about a percent. So this is just giving you information. This is, they did the two things categories. We got females and males, and then sports. Okay, so gender and sports, what they preferred or played. All right, so what percent, that's how we know it's a relative frequency of the students surveyed are female and prefer basketball. So this is where we have to find a joint frequency because it's asking are female and preferred basketball. For relative frequencies, we're always going to put it over our total, which is 80. So it's going to be a fraction. Let me make that look more like what we see when we see fractions. So let's look at, again, I'll use my highlighter and I'm going to see where they meet. Females that liked basketball. So I'm going to go females and highlight that across and liked basketball. Oh, where do they meet? 6 females preferred basketball. So in my calculator, I do 6 divided by 80, and then I take that and I either move the decimal 2 to the right, or I like to just times by 100, so you can just put the percent symbol on the number. So if you did 6 divided by 80, you would have got 0.075. This is just, so again, our one trick is either move it 2 to the right, or if you just multiply by 100, that gives you automatically, it's 7.5%. That's what a relative frequency is. It's asking for the total. So for B, I want you to go ahead and try B, C, and D, finding the percent. Remember, everything is always going to be over this 180. And then you'll pause the video and see if yours looks like mine. Okay, so your answer should match mine. If they don't, I want you to look them over. And then you are going to do the front page only of our practice sheet for homework. That will be brought in Monday.